Have you ever heard of a war that began years before World War II officially started, but became one of its most critical battlegrounds? A conflict that involved tens of millions of people and reshaped the entire continent of Asia. Today, we're diving deep into the story of the Second Sino-Japanese War, a monumental struggle that is often overshadowed but is absolutely essential to understanding the modern world. This isn't just a series of dates and battles. It's a story of resilience, tragedy, and the forging of nations. So, let's set the scene. The year is 1937, but the storm had been brewing for a long, long time. Japan, a rapidly modernizing and ambitious empire, had its eyes set on expansion. It saw China, a vast and resource-rich neighbor, as the key to its dream of dominating East Asia. Tensions had been escalating for years. Japan had already invaded and occupied Manchuria in 1931, setting up a puppet state called Manchu. Skirmishes and provocations were becoming more and more common. The air was thick with the feeling that something much larger was about to erupt. And then, on the night of July 7th, 1937, it happened. Near the Polo Bridge, just outside Beijing, a Japanese soldier went missing during training exercises. The Japanese army demanded to enter the nearby city of Wamping to search for him, but the Chinese garrison refused. Shots were fired. We still don't know for sure who fired first, but it doesn't really matter. That single incident was the spark that ignited the full-scale invasion of China. This wasn't just another border clash. This was the beginning of total war. Japan's military machine, which was far more modernized and better equipped at the time, moved with shocking speed and brutality. Their strategy was what they called sakudoku, sakutsu, meaning quick war, quick victory. They believed they could crush Chinese resistance within 3 months. Their forces swept down from the north, capturing Beijing and the major port city of Tianjin. At the same time, another major front opened up in the south, targeting China's bustling commercial heart, Shanghai. The Battle of Shanghai was an absolute bloodbath. What Japan thought would be a quick victory turned into a grueling 3-month struggle. Chinese soldiers, despite being outgunned, fought with incredible tenacity, defending every street and building. They were determined to show the world, and Japan, that China would not simply roll over. The battle was a brutal wake-up call for both sides. For Japan, it shattered their illusion of a swift victory. For China, it proved their will to resist, but came at a devastating cost, losing many of their best-trained troops. After Shanghai fell, the Japanese Imperial Army marched toward the then capital of China, and what happened next is one of the darkest chapters in modern history. In December 1937, Japanese forces entered Nanjing, and for 6 horrific weeks, they unleashed a wave of terror on the city's inhabitants. This event is now known as the Nanjing Massacre. Hundreds of thousands of unarmed civilians and disarmed soldiers were killed in mass executions. The violence was systematic and widespread. It's a deeply painful memory, a scar on the conscience of humanity, and it solidified the resolve of the Chinese people to fight on, no matter the cost. With their capital city violated and their armies in retreat, the situation looked bleak for China. But the country did not surrender. The Chinese government, led by Chiang Kai-shek, and the Nationalist Party, or Kuomintang, moved their capital inland, first to Wuhan, and then to the mountainous city of Chongqing. This strategy was called trading space for time. They knew they couldn't defeat Japan in a head-on confrontation, so they drew the Japanese forces deeper and deeper into the vast Chinese interior, stretching their supply lines and bogging them down in a war of attrition they couldn't win. But the nationalists weren't the only ones fighting back. There was another major force in China, the communists, led by Mao Zedong. Before the Japanese invasion, the nationalists and communists were locked in a bitter civil war. However, facing a common enemy, they formed a reluctant alliance known as the Second United Front. While they rarely fought side by side in major battles, and their cooperation was fraught with suspicion and tension, they both played crucial roles in the resistance. The nationalists fought the majority of the conventional battles, while the communists excelled at guerrilla warfare, harassing Japanese troops behind enemy lines, sabotaging railways, and organizing resistance among the rural population. This two-pronged resistance, though disunited, created a nightmare for the Japanese military. They controlled the major cities, railways, and coastlines, but they could never truly pacify the countryside. For every town they occupied, they were surrounded by a hostile population. This was not the quick, glorious war they had envisioned. Instead, they were stuck in what they called the China quagmire. They had won battle after battle, but they were no closer to winning the war. China, despite immense suffering and millions of casualties, simply refused to break. For years, China fought largely alone on the world stage. The Western powers offered sympathy and some limited aid, but they were preoccupied with the rising threat of Nazi Germany in Europe. China was holding down over 1 million Japanese troops, preventing Japan from expanding further and potentially attacking the Soviet Union or European colonies in Southeast Asia. They were fighting a crucial part of a world war that hadn't officially been declared yet. Then, everything changed on December 7th, 1941. Japan, desperate to break the stalemate in China and secure the resources it needed to continue the war, made a fateful gamble. They launched a surprise attack on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor. This act brought the United States officially into World War II, suddenly. The Second Sino-Japanese War was no longer a regional conflict. It merged with a global struggle against the Axis powers, and China officially became one of the major Allied powers, alongside the U.S., Great Britain, and the Soviet Union. With America in the war, the tide began to turn. The U.S. provided China with much-needed supplies, weapons, and military advisors, who helped train and equip Chinese armies. The famous Flying Tigers, a group of volunteer American pilots, fought alongside the Chinese Air Force, becoming symbols of Sino-American cooperation. China's role was now more critical than ever. By tying down the bulk of the Japanese army on the mainland, China prevented them from being redeployed to fight against American forces in the Pacific. The war in China raged on for another 4 years, a brutal and exhausting fight across a vast landscape, but the end was now in sight. In Europe, Germany surrendered in May 1945. The Allies then turned their full attention to Japan. In August 1945, the United States dropped atomic bombs on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. At the same time, the Soviet Union, honoring its agreement with the Allies, declared war on Japan and launched a massive invasion of Japanese-held Manchuria. Facing this overwhelming assault and the threat of complete annihilation, Japan had no choice. On August 15th, 1945, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's unconditional surrender. After 8 long, brutal years, the Second Sino-Japanese War was finally over. The world celebrated, and China stood as one of the victorious Allied nations. But the cost was almost unimaginable. It is estimated that between 15 and 20 million Chinese people, the vast majority of them civilians, lost their lives. Countless cities were left in ruins. The economy was shattered, and the country was scarred by years of trauma. The war had also profoundly changed the balance of power within China. The nationalist government, which had borne the brunt of the conventional fighting, was severely weakened, both militarily and financially. In contrast, the communists, through their guerrilla tactics and land reform policies in the areas they controlled, had significantly expanded their influence and popular support. The ink on the surrender documents was barely dry before the fragile united front between the nationalists and communists completely collapsed. The country, exhausted from 8 years of fighting a foreign invader, was plunged back into civil war. This conflict would last for another 4 years, ultimately ending with a communist victory in 1949 and the establishment of the People's Republic of China. So, the legacy of the Second Sino-Japanese War is immense and complex. It was a war of national survival for China, a defining moment that shaped its modern identity. It was a crucial, though often forgotten, theater of World War II that played a vital role in the Allied victory. It led to the end of Japan's imperial ambitions and set the stage for the rise of a new China. Understanding this conflict is key to understanding the geopolitics of Asia today. It's a somber reminder of the incredible human cost of war, but also a powerful testament to the strength and resilience of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming adversity. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into such a critical moment in history. If you found this video informative, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories that shaped our world. Let me know in the comments what piece of history you'd like to explore next. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.